Okay, I kind of have to explain this video here, so just bear with me. But a local exhaust shop to me that I've worked with for years, they requested that I come in on a job with them as a specialist since I do stainless steel, and the owner, that's not really his forte. I said, absolutely, and if you don't mind, I'd like to get it all on video so I can put together an episode for you guys to watch, you can learn something about it with. And he was like, yeah, no problem. So I'm going through all of this footage here, and it was all shot in one take. And it's got that, like that old school TFS chill vibe where you're just kind of hanging out and I'm talking to the camera as I'm working. I'm like, dude, I can't cut this up. I miss that style of episode, shooting it and putting these together like that. I know a lot of you guys do too. So to see a cut up, condensed nuts and bolts version, you should definitely go check out the Weld Coach YouTube channel because that's better suited for that one. And this long format of just hanging out or whatever, I really hope you guys enjoy because I know a lot of you have said that you missed it. And yeah, like I said, I miss doing it. So hope to see you at the end of it. And yeah, as always, thanks for being a part of TFS. Yay, super cheap intro. Okay, I'm not going to jump straight into that exhaust system. There's a couple things I need. One, a little bit of practice, kind of just to make sure that I'm doing okay and that I can still run this just fine. I want to loosen up a little bit before I dig right into it. And the second thing I want to develop or figure out is what my style is going to be, right? Style is how you're going to present it. So when working with the builder as he was putting all of this together, there's a few things that went back and forth. Some of that being information about how the exhaust is going to be presented after it's finished, right? The owner might say, I want to keep the stainless welds, the rainbows and stuff like that that it produces, I want to keep them on there. He might want to polish them out. The owner might even want to grind down all of them. So I have to make sure that on this practice piece, I get good uniformity, nice control out of it, and I got to make sure we penetrate all the way through, which means, of course, like everything with stainless steel, you should be back purging. And this line right here is hooked up right now. I think pumping through this, I only have about 10 CFH because it's a really small part, 100% argon. I've decided that I'm going to use the BBW kit. I got CK Worldwide consumables inside of my number 20 torch. This is 332nd laser tungsten from CK Worldwide, the only stuff I use. And yes, all of this, including the Fronius iWave, which I'm using the Magic Wave predecessor to that, is all available at weldmetalsonline.com. So I'm going to dig into this. Just going to start with a couple of little things here. So normally when I do a job like this, I'm sitting at about, I don't know, 60 to 70 amps. But in this case, I want to dial that down just a little bit, so that way I can get a little bit more time to concentrate on my uniformity. And as I sit there a little bit longer, it's also going to heat up the part a little bit more, and that'll almost guarantee that I can get full penetration. I have better control out of it if I have less amps and I go a little bit slower. Somebody's got a motorcycle. So going just a little bit slower, I have a little bit more time to really play with each individual dab. But the only offset with that is I got a lot more heat that goes into this part. I'm cool with this pattern. Alrighty. So of course this has to be purged. I'm not going to use fancy anything with this, just some masking tape. Pop this mamma jammer on here. This is what pumps the argon through it, fills the part up. I'm going to turn this up to, we're going to go to about 15 to 20, so that way it fills the part up pretty quick. When it comes to purging, you just kind of have to experiment with it a little bit. But while that's actually filling up here, that gives us a chance to clean up the part, which we definitely need to do. Okay, I got to jump in here real quick because I'm about ready to have a flub that I can't edit my way out of. In a minute here, you're going to hear me mention JMD tubes. when I'm talking about the headers or working with the headers. That's the flub. The thing is, before I actually took on this build, I was working with the builder himself, and he said, what material do you want to use? I said, go to JMD tubes. It's the best quality, it's made in USA, and you know, we can trust it, it's good. I've used them for years, and they are not sponsoring this episode. I actually just really like their product, and I recommend it to, well, virtually everybody. So the headers themselves, the header is from China, I think. It just came with a kit that came with the car, and so are the tubes that come off of that merge collector. I didn't realize it at the time until I started welding it that they were not JMD tubes. So if I mention, you know, you hear me mention JMD as I have the header in front of me, and then I start realizing that these are crap, those aren't JMD tubes. I need to clarify that one because, yeah, there's no way for me to get around this one. So sorry, on with the video. Now, I was in communication with the builder of this part throughout the beginning and of course up until now before dropping it off. And I mentioned a few things that I like to have on a part when I'm setting it up, right? So the inside of it needs to be completely cleaned. JMD is very good about cleaning their tubes up before shipping them. I believe they go into like a hot tank and they get scrubbed from the inside out, which is a really good thing. So the builder in this case, what he did is he wiped the insides out with acetone. Normally I would like take a Scotch-Brite or a wire wheel or something to the inside of it to buff the stainless out. It's not really a necessary step. Some people would consider it to be a little bit overkill, but it's just one of those things that I really like to do to make sure it's really clean. That wasn't done on this job, this particular job here. So it's not a deal breaker, it'll be okay, but the insides are prepped extremely well. And then of course, when it comes to tacks, he says, well, how many do you want on there? I said, well, bare minimum, you need about 4 tacks, but the more you can get on there, the better, the less distortion it's gonna have. And I also emphasized fit up. Fit up has to be extremely tight. And we've got that all throughout this part. So the builder on this one is, you know, he's a really good dude. That should be enough purge time on here. I always like to start my jobs with an out of sight bead just to get a feel for it. So I know that this section of the header here is facing the block. So if I start here, it's not gonna be seen. Also on the top here, if I start this joint on the top section of it, then we're good. If I start the area around the V-band, the same thing, it'll be out of sight. So that way it gives me just a little bit of time to get everything dialed in just right the way I want it. This benchtop welding plate here, it's a piece of aluminum. It's meant to not scratch the part as I'm working with it. Now, the part does already have some scratches and stuff on it, which, you know, it happens, but we're gonna try to minimize the total amount of scratching as we go through this. So I'm just kind of setting up myself some props for my hand, just to make it a little bit easier to run this part. Thinking if I go here, and this tube's big enough, I can just run right across the top here. And we'll just try to get a feel for what this stainless is like. It may be okay, it might be a complete pain in the butt, but we'll see. The Summer of Welding event is still happening right now over at weldmetalsonline.com, where every $5 you spend on your order gets you a chance to win this TIG 225X, this MIG 180, and this Cut 50, all from Prime Weld. All 3 machines could be yours. No purchase necessary. Make sure you check out the official rules. I'm also giving away to random orders a CK Worldwide Flex Lock TIG torch, brand spanking new, and so far the 3 that we've given away, my crew and I have written a really awesome message up top, and we've all signed it and sent it out or whatever. The excitement and feedback from the people that we've given a torch away to has been really incredible so far. As of right now, we're about halfway through the month and I'm running out of torches, so I'm probably gonna order up some more and throw some more in there. So get your butt over to weldmetalsonline.com, grab something really cool. Maybe you'll win one of these, maybe you'll win all 3 of these. Either way, you're supporting us so we can make more really awesome content for you guys. Thank you as always, and back to the video. It is a little different, I can tell you that right now. It's a lot thinner, and the arc wants to wander a little bit, so I have already, like off the get-go, you know, as I was pumping 50 amps into the last part, I'm going significantly less on this one now. I don't exactly know how many amps, but It's not all 50. I can guarantee you that. Yeah, I mean, it's flowing. Having blocks and things to prop on and rest on and move your part around on and stuff is a blessing. I keep all kinds of stuff around for that. This stuff is acting very weird. I'm going to give it the double tap there because I don't think that was enough post flow time. It's very, very thin stuff. I can tell you that. So just remember, I mentioned before that I have a dab number, and in this case it's 15. So no matter what, I'm only going to 15 dabs and then I'm stopping. Aside from uniformity and things like that, which is what it's good for, it also helps keep you really focused. So you don't have to worry about welding the whole thing. You just know that that's as far as you're going to go before you stop and then reposition the part. Still pumping argon. There's some really interesting stuff that is floating into here. I'm not entirely sure what it is. It's very indicative of cheaper stainless. So if you have a color pattern that isn't quite right, or it's like there's a section in here where it was gold and then it's silver and then it's gold again, and there was, it was the same consistency all throughout. And if your arc tends to want to wander and get a little wacky, or if your colors get a little darker than they normally do, sometimes it is the stainless. That's not excuse making or whatever. It's just the nature of less expensive stainless. We'll just put it that way. So you can prop that there. I can get here. And this section going across the front looks pretty good. There's kind of a ominous glow to it as I'm welding it. It's a little strange. There's like an aura that's surrounding the arc as I'm welding it. Another very convenient thing about putting your initial start, stop, or where you begin the weld, aside from having that little practice round or whatever, another great thing is that when you tie it in, if your dab count is a little bit off, it won't be noticed if you have just like a slightly shorter run. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I did 15 all the way around, and then the last one here I stopped with 10. The only way you're going to see that it's an inconsistent pattern is if you look on the inside where you can't see it. So we got this first part done here. Looks pretty good. It's a little colorful. Consistency is okay, but it definitely looks better than the factory ones that are on there. Let's go after this O2 bung next. It's got a pretty big gap, so if I close that up relatively quickly, I'm going to need more amps to do that. I'm going to turn this up to 70 amps. That should put it pretty good. Now I would be able to sit there and maintain just fine at that 50 pretty much all day long, but I don't want to overcook it or potentially risk damaging it. So I'll just go ahead and turn it up, and I'll try to keep the uniformity decent on it, which it doesn't look too bad. Now, a few years ago I made a video on 10 tips you can use to make perfect stainless O2 bung welds. I suggest you could check it out if you want to learn some really awesome secrets. This should finish the job right here. The very last dab I did, dipped it. But what did I do? I left it sitting in there. The reason why I left it sitting in there is because I want the argon to stay on top of the part. If I ripped it away, then the argon would stop shielding the part, and then it would oxidize and change multiple colors really quickly, which I don't want to do that. So instead, we'll blend that back in. And there we go. A little splash of color. Let's tackle this V-band. Hopefully I don't melt this purge plug. This unknown tube is giving me a lot of fits right now. Really jacking with my uniformity here. It's annoying me just a little bit. So I'd be completely lying to you guys if I told you that every single time we got this, we did a job like this, it was perfect and nothing ever went wrong. But it doesn't always happen that way. That's okay. So I'm going to try a different position here, and if this doesn't work, I'll just cut bait and try again. So I wasn't able to wrap my wrist around, so I had to cut bait a couple of dabs early. Not that big of a deal. This joint in itself is relatively difficult because this flange is a good verified quality, but the tube is iffy. So it is acting a little bit weird. I can tell we've got a solid penetration profile though. There's like a little seam going right down the middle of it. And that's a good thing to see. It means it's soaking up and building through on the other side. Now, welding this flange, I do have a bit more focus on the flange itself and less on the tube. So that means that the arc is actually pointed more or biased on the flange, and the rest of it's kind of bleeding over into the tube itself. And that is a very useful technique for welding V-bands, specifically for welding V-bands. Or welding thick to thin. My uniformity, I think I'd like to do just a little bit better on these, but it is what it is. Those of you with a very keen eye notice that I'm welding every single one of these in the exact same direction. That's just a me thing. I think for good uniformity and consistency, that's a must. I hope the rest of the system isn't like this because, man, I really don't want to fight this. Okay, the plug popped out there, so we got to pause here. Wait for the setup to fill back up. Don't want to risk a bad purge. Okay, so I don't remember if I said it or not, but there's 20 CFH pumping through this header. And the pre-purge that I just gave it, since the plug popped out, was roughly 10 to 15 minutes. God, this stuff is welding so bad. One piece of advice I got for you guys: don't buy cheap stainless. Okay, final round here. This little tiny bit I gotta close up. Turn that purge off. Pop these suckers off, and this one is done. I've mentioned a handful of times before that gloves are not for handling hot metal. They're in fact for accidental encounters with hot metal. And the reason why is because when you grab hot metal with leather, it shrinks. And if your TIG gloves shrink, well, what's the point of having gloves that fit well? You lose your dexterity when that happens. Okay, we're having a look here. I can see full pen all the way through. I see good uniformity throughout. I see it's very interestingly colored on the inside. There's like some different looking oxidation on the inside of these tubes, which is not normally common in high grade stainless, especially when the builder said he did clean them out, and I believe so because I've seen, you know, his other work. But hey, it is what it is. This is what we're going to get out of it. But this one's solid. Hopefully these are the worst looking welds that I laid down on this job. Okay, it is a second day now. Yesterday we got the headers done, and today we got to do both of these systems here. So I did notice in my footage that I didn't have a great arc shot, and that's primarily because on the headers there, I was more focused on doing the headers and getting the job done properly with quality than I was on the camera settings. So I'll do my best in post to correct those arc shots, and hopefully they'll look good, but if they don't, my apologies in advance. I'll definitely make sure I take the time to make sure that these arc shots are spectacular. I've got 20 cubic feet per hour pumping through, actually no. I've got 30 cubic feet per hour of argon pumping through this entire system right now. Normally I'd like to see something more flanged so I can do smaller sections and don't have to use too much of it. But at least on this pre-purge right now, we're about 30. And the reason behind that is it's going to take a while to fill this whole system up. So while I clean all of it off, the argon's just pumping through. Okay, let me jump in here again real quick, just because I know this comment always comes up. I never purge my system, it's a waste of argon, and I've never needed to. Yeah, you may think it's a waste of argon, or it's too expensive, or any of that other stuff. Well, let's be smart, use our heads, and do a little bit of math here. This is 330 cubic feet. I own this cylinder outright, so I don't have to buy a new cylinder plus the gas every single time. So 330 cubic feet, and I'm running at 30 cubic feet per hour. That means in 11 hours worth of purge, this cylinder will be completely flat. The only thing is, this job doesn't take 11 hours. In fact, I only build it for 6. So let's just say if it were only building for the purge itself at 6 hours, that means we're right about here. Right? But the torch is running periodically at 40 cubic feet per hour, and I also, in that 6 hours, use less of a purge. On the practice piece, I use 10. On the headers, I use 20. So somewhere between about a third and half the cylinder is what's going to get billed to the customer. So again, I own the cylinder outright, so I only pay for the gas. And I do get it at wholesale, which the gas comes out to me, my price, $52. So if I bill half the cylinder, basically roughly what I used for this job to the customer owes me 26 bucks. So whatever job it is that you're doing, and you're saying, oh, you know, the back purge is a waste of money or whatever the case, really? Besides, the customer pays for it if you're doing a job for somebody else. So why do a half-ass job when the customer's paying for it? I'm sure this argument's going to go down in the comments anyway, but let's think about it. You can either spend 26 bucks, or even if the cylinder was 100 bucks of argon, you could spend 50 bucks doing the proper job now, or spend several $100s in labor fixing the job you botched to begin with. Which one would you like to do? Okay, so big question. A lot of people ask, do you weld the entire joint all in one swing, or do you do just sections of it and then run the whole length of the system, or however it's all set up? It technically does and does not matter, okay? So there's a couple of different ways to look at this. If your fit up game is really strong and is really good, just like this whole system is, how it was built, fit up is super tight so you don't have to worry too much about distortion. More importantly, we have a lot of tack welds on the system, so distortion is not really something I worry about. Also, if you look into, if you weld just this section and you skip on and weld this section and then weld this and just weld segments of each one of them, it allows them time to cool down and kind of settle back in. And as you slowly work your way around the system, it will pull and distort in that direction, but be able to cool down to another one. So that'll minimize distortion. If your fit up game sucks, I guess just try to weld the whole thing all the way around and hope for the best. But yeah, ultimately fit up is part of this. You got to have a good fit up. So I'm going to go from probably going to see if I can get at least from the over position like this up to the top. We're not going to go over and go downhill. I'll explain that in a little bit. Now again, on this system, I'm going 50 amps full throttle all the way through, 15 dabs each pass, or each segment that I run is 15 dabs and then I stop immediately. Yeah, see, that's welding a heck of a lot better than the Chinese stuff that was on those headers. Much, much better. Now, do take note that I have these two bench plates sitting on here as to not scratch up the part, or at least to minimize the amount of scratching that we get out of it. See if I can get a nice good angle on here. Okay, I'm going to skip over this lap right here, just for right now, so I can allow this to cool, because I have to weld this the opposite direction. Got my money's worth on that piece of filler. Can't get another 15 out of it, so not gonna bother. Those look pretty good. I'm happy with that. Try not to bust my Fura cup. Okay, I'm also going to, you know what, I'll go ahead and weld this direction, then I'll come back, flip around and weld this V-band the other direction. I have to go the opposite direction on the V-band because it just makes more sense to orient it going through it this way. So this little pie cut here, we'll knock this little guy out with the matching direction, but like I said, the V-band's gonna change direction on that one. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions about the direction thing. Like, why do I only like going one direction? It's just uniformity. Is there anything wrong with going the opposite? No. It kind of looks a little tacky. Of course, I think the worst thing is when you, let's say I weld everything in this direction, then I turn around and go back up the other way. I think that looks just absolutely horrendous. I'd rather see a crappy weld than see somebody change direction midway through, so I like to go all the way around. This part here should be cooled down, so I'm gonna flip over there, see if I can get that knocked out, and then we might rotate the system and maybe weld the V-band last, so that way everything's completely cooled. I don't want to waste too much time here as the argon continues to pump through. It's just wasting it if we're not actively welding on this system. Now these here are prime weld fixture tables. I did a video on Weld Coach comparing a bunch of different fixture tables, and these prime welds are on my favorites of that list. Ooh. Dang it, just dumped all my filler. Can you pick up 045 with your gloves? I can with my Defiant metal ones. Something to consider when you're buying gloves. Can you pick up small diameter filler wire? By the way, Defiant metal gloves, even these pink ones that I wear, they're available at weldmetalsonline.com. Use my discount code TFS10 to save on your order at checkout. Oh man, I just did stupid. I exhaled and blew my gas away. It's all right, maybe they wanted rainbows. I'll remember to keep my hood down this time. If you wear headphones or your audio is up loud enough, you probably know I'm a very heavy, steady breather, especially when I'm welding. Helps me concentrate. So when I'm done, since I don't breathe super hard, I breathe steady, almost like I'm holding my breath, but when I exhale really hard, if I have my hood up and I exhale really hard, I blow the damn gas away. That's not something you normally want to do. So that's why that changed to all kinds of colorful instead of the silver like this one is. But that's okay. We will survive. I promise it is not the end of the world. Here's a handy trick for you guys. Not just for holding up cars. This is obviously gonna put us in a couple of weird positions, but that's okay. Not everything is gonna be perfectly laid out for you on the bench. However, you should always be as comfortable as possible. I know I can kneel down, but I also know my knees don't like that. We're gonna try to sit. For you young bucks out there with perfectly good knees, well, enjoy them while they last. Okay. I'm as comfortable as I can be here. Lucky dab number 13, I dipped it. Could I have gotten 2 more out of it? Yeah, maybe. But we play the quality game here. So that's 2 tungstens down. If you dip your tungsten and you know you dipped your tungsten, stop and change it. That's why they call this a discipline. I had to stop at 12 there. I'm starting to go slightly downhill. And when you do that, the gas is going to want to pull the atmosphere behind it because it's heavier than the atmosphere. So if you get too far past the tube, the flowing argon will suck in the oxygen or atmosphere that we breathe in. That will cause your weld to blow out. So if you know that you're starting to slowly go downhill, immediately stop. I mean, just don't do it. Whatever you do, don't do it. Yeah, I was struggling on this one. Wasn't quite going my way. Just decided to cut bait. This is a rather tricky weld. See if I can get a little bit better position by rotating the torch. It's a little bit better. Probably about there. Oh, we're almost back to start. You know what? If I can turn it up this way, I'll be completely back to start. Yeah, I can work with that. Okay, theoretical final round. I love this stuff. Yeah, I'm okay with that. Yeah, it's a solid run. Okay, now we just need to turn up the amps just a little bit. I can do both of these hangers and I can knock out that V-band. So I think I'm gonna jump it to, these are all about 1/8 inch wall. I'm gonna go up to, let's do 90 amps. And if I need a little bit less, I'll rely on my foot pedal for that. Fire in the hole. So since this flange is very thick, I'm focusing or concentrating the arc on the hanger itself and letting it kind of bleed over into the exhaust tube. Here I'm getting a little bit hung up. If I'm at least halfway, that's all right. That'll be a decent looking weld. I'll hit it with a double tap here. Let that argon sink in. Make sure I can make this full swing. Yeah, I can pull that. We'll let this post flow run. Keep as much argon on there as possible. Try to keep some of the color out of it. Let's see, do I want to do an overhead? Haven't done one in a while. Let's have a go. I'm down to try it. Oh man, I dipped it. That looks pretty damn good for overhead though. I'll friggin' take it. I'm not gonna complain about that look at all. God, if I get this far and the thing rolls off, it'd be like the worst thing ever. That would just flat out suck. All right. Let's see where I can swing in here. And if you're wondering, it still is the same 15 dabs on each pass that I established in the beginning. This battery is running just a little bit low on juice. So we're gonna try and get this done as fast as possible. Of course, argon is still pumping through the system. And this is the last thing that has to be welded. The very, very last thing.